Hi, everybody. Most of you already know me, but I am Trina Rose Lunn, and this is the Stop Accepting Less class on self-love. Now, to introduce myself, about 4 years ago, little less than 4 years ago, was dying of multiple diseases. Autoimmunes, multiple sclerosis was the most debilitating of them, but I also had fibromyalgia, something called trigeminal neuralgia, which was an incredible pain condition in my face. And I was over 200 pounds heavier and really just waiting to die. In fact, the only reason that I didn't check myself out was I had two beautiful children that I didn't want them to live with the stigma and worry and the mental issues that were likely to come from having a mother that chose to kill herself rather than be with them. But I was slowly killing myself with the way I was eating, with not caring, not taking care of myself. All of that changed, and there'll be many places where I go into exactly what all the miracles were that occurred in my life. However, when the miracles started to happen and I started to listen and follow, my entire life changed. I was blessed to have a partner that also was experiencing miracles. And that's one of the things I will go into is finding your support and your tribe. Because when you have other people, self-love becomes easier. Because the goal in this is to self-love, right? Not love from outside. But if you never see it reflected in the mirror, it's a much harder uphill battle. So I wanted to start with that. Just a little bit of who I am. On that regard, I am completely cured of everything. I do not have any illnesses or dis-ease within my body. I had an MRI that my multiple sclerosis is completely healed, which according to medical science is not possible. I had lesions on my brain and spine. There's no evidence that they were ever there. I used to be on 28 medications a day, some of them 6 pills a day per medication. I take absolutely nothing except for an occasional, vitamin D or B12 if I'm in a, cold climate where I'm not getting enough sunlight, but nothing else. Now, what I need to teach and my mission is to help people learn how to love themselves, because at the core root of all of the healing is what that came down to. And it's because in very basic layman's terms, and there's a lot of science that backs this up, we create our own reality. Well, if you believe you are sick, if you believe you are worthless, if you believe you annoy everybody around you, guess what? You are. You're going to, because we create our own reality. So as we learn to love ourselves, your entire world shifts, your health gets better, you are happy with life, you see good things come to you in your life. And eventually, as we're all doing it, the entire world will shift. Now, my coaching is Stop Accepting Less, which is also the name of this class, because that is the core root of all of this. Stop accepting less from yourself, from other people, and eventually, once you realize that you are in control of it, stop accepting less from the universe. You get to the point where you say, you know what? I'm not having that in my world. And that's when advocates, people who go, you know what? The example I love to use is plastics in the ocean. Well, eventually, if you don't want plastics in the ocean, you become one of those people that changes that, because you will not accept that in your world anymore. And it is that energy of going, I'm not putting up with this, that allows that to change. Now, there are 3 main pillars of self-love. And the first thing I want to address is the reason that I teach the 3 pillars of self-love is there is a lot of wonderful light workers out there helping other people embrace loving themselves. And they'll say, love yourself, love yourself, love yourself some more, go to spas, pamper yourself. I love the reward culture, right? I did the laundry, let me go get a coffee. It's beautiful, but it doesn't address the underlying reasons why you weren't loving yourself, and it doesn't tell you how to love yourself beyond the band-aids of the things that give you a temporary endorphin hit so that you feel better in the moment. But it doesn't change your life. And so the first pillar is find out, why am I not loving myself? Now, a big part of that comes into societal programming. And so one of the things I really like to address in this is, even before you get to your own shadow work, which is where you find the reasons you're not loving yourself that are programmed, make peace with the fact that you're gonna piss people off. Because when we love ourselves in our society, suddenly you get called egotistical, an egomaniac. How dare she walk around like she's all that? You know what? You have to, if you truly love yourself. And it will upset the people who are not loving themselves. But the best answer to that is, I love myself. The question isn't, why am I loving myself too much? It's, why aren't you also loving yourself? We lift everybody else up by being that way. And it hurts. I mean, I remember feeling horrible about myself, and I would see the girl walking around, with all the, got all the attention and all the guys staring at her and stuff, going, why can't I be her? I didn't hate her. I didn't even hate her confidence. The truth is, I was jealous of her confidence because I didn't feel it inside. And when you realize that you are not really hurting the other person, you're inspiring them. Because eventually, like me, they do go home and they do go, you know what? I need to do better for myself. So undoing the part of society that tells us that it is bad to truly love and embrace ourselves is honestly one of the first things that we have to address, or we will self-sabotage in order to avoid upsetting other people. Most of us, if you're actually looking at self-love, are empathic. We don't want to hurt somebody else. We don't want to go around and go, I'm making that other woman feel bad because I'm living my best life. So getting over that and coming to peace with the fact that you're not hurting, you're inspiring, even if they feel temporarily upset or hurt, is a very important piece of it. But then comes shadow work, which I absolutely love. And shadow work is a term for where you go back and find the places in your life and your programming that are giving you the behaviors that are self-sabotaging yourself. Now, a great example, whenever I would do good in school, my mom would give me candy, cake. That was her way of saying, good job, you've done something awesome. Not surprisingly, my whole family had weight problems. But it was the programming that if I did good, I should get rewarded with something sweet. There's a programming. Shadows are often that was a positive, by the way, I thought, right? Except then, as I got older, how did I self-soothe? If I was upset about something, I would give myself food and I would placate myself that way. And there are many things with shadow work. Very often, we are not aware of what they are. So there is a system that I like to use for finding it. And I'm going to touch on this briefly, but I do have, classes and such that will go much more deeply into how you do your shadow work. Is you look for the flags. We often talk about red flags. You find them with yourself. When I teach the class on shadow work, one of the examples I absolutely love is, say someone cuts you off in traffic and you go, I want that dead. I had to bleep myself, I realized. And, that's a little bit of an excessive reaction to being cut off in traffic. I mean, really, the guy probably just wasn't paying attention, was distracted. Well, in this case, or this example, the guy who's so upset was going to be his high school quarterback. In his head, he was going to be the next Tom Brady. He thought, you know what? I'm going to become my high school quarterback. I'm going to end up in the NFL. I'm going to have women and money. He had this whole life in his head. And then, freshman year, he was in a car accident. Ruined his chances of playing football. He has spent his entire life now having a subconscious programming that someone being reckless in traffic ruined his life. Now, if he were to catch the flag, notice the places where the emotional reaction was excessive to the situation, we're talking someone growth focused that is having rigorous self-honesty with themselves and going, okay, yeah, that might have been a bit much. he can go, why do I do that? And look back and find. Now, if he looks at it honestly, what are the chances he was really going to get signed by the NFL? If he looks statistically, not very high, even if he was amazing. And now, maybe he's an engineer with a great life, a wife, 3 beautiful children. He has not been able to appreciate that life the same way because he's still carrying these shadows of the imaginary life, the timeline where he became this quarterback that was taken away from him. When he finds this, start thinking, first of all, what are the chances? What did I really lose? What did I gain? What is my life now? Go back mentally to the time. This is how I deal with the shadows. Forgive everybody involved because they were, as we all are, doing the best they could at the moment. And then forgive himself. Because when you start to find your shadows and you realize the places where you haven't really been living because of the programming, because of the voice in your head that tells you, you can't wear makeup because that makes you look like a whore. You know, maybe like a family member would tell you this and you would go, okay, I can't put myself out there because that means I'm a bad person. And it held you back from things you've wanted to do. You start to learn to go back and forgive littler you for believing, well, forgive the French, but for believing the bullshit that we told us about ourselves, that society tells us about ourselves. And we can't let that go until we know why we have these behaviors. The majority of them are caused by societal programming and fear, actually even more than individual events. Because very often it ties into what society has told us. Now, one of the examples I love of this, and I'm going to use this actually to demonstrate another piece in shadow work. This is very more often with the feminine energy, what I call submarines. We are so good at believing our own bullshit that we don't know where our shadows are sometimes. We'll go, that upset me, but I can't figure out why. It comes out in our speech. And an example was I was in a disagreement and my partner was upset and he got loud. Oh, darn. I reacted like I was being attacked. I called him an ogre. One of the gentlest men I've ever met, I called an ogre. That was the submarine to be able to see that I had an overreaction to a stimulus that was not anywhere near warranted of that. The shadow that I was able to find for that, and this is why I use this as the example, was societal. I was taught from the time I was 4 years old, and maybe even a little earlier, that the masculine were predators and women were prey. That men were dangerous, and I always had to protect myself against them. So it wasn't even my particular shadow. It was society's shadow that I had absorbed. So shadow work, again, why do we do these things? Why don't we love ourselves? Now, when it comes to self-love, the reason this is so important is how many times have we seen the reactions of other people and assumed it was about us? And then internalized that that frown must mean that he doesn't like this dress. He thinks I look fat in this dress. I really shouldn't have worn it. Damn it, I should have worn that blue dress. I know it's his favorite color. We do this. You know what? He was probably frowning because he remembered he forgot to change the oil, or it often has nothing even to do with us, but we internalize these microaggressions against ourselves all the time. And one of the reasons I love to use, one of my favorite quotes is from Eleanor Roosevelt, and I'm going to bring this, I always find a way to work it in, is you wouldn't worry so much about what other people think of you if you realized how seldom they do. No one is paying attention. They really aren't, unless you say, hey, pay attention to where I screwed up. There is another microaggression that we have against our own self-love. Every time we feel good about ourselves, if we are not in a place of self-love, we will immediately follow it with a, yeah, but I did forget to do that. You know, oh, I did great. I advertised this class. Well, one person showed up. Guess what? I'm thrilled. that you are here, but this is what our ego does to keep us feeling small and to stop us from stepping into our true, authentic self. And that is what self-love is all about. Becoming the highest and greatest and best you that you can potentially conceive of. But we can't do that as long as we're telling ourselves we're small. And we do it because we are afraid that if we get big, we leave those we love behind. I only realized this one relatively recently, despite years of doing literally daily shadow work, which is also a place where I was making myself small, telling myself, I'm healing, I'm healing, I'm healing, I'm healing. I still have all these shadows. I'm still broken. I'm still wounded. I'm not anymore. I'm not broken. I'm not healing. Now I'm growing. And you know what? It looks the same on the outside. I still find the places that I want to improve things, but I no longer see myself as a broken individual. But most of us do, and we do so because we don't want to leave behind the people we think won't step up and love the new us. Because if somebody loved the timid you that would be all coy and shy, well, how are they going to love me if I'm stepping out there going, take me as I am or else? We worry. And we think we're not going to have the support. But the thing is you doing that inspires them. Can it be rough in the moment? It can. There are people that are not going to take kindly. Guess what? They're not your people currently. And I'm talking friends, family, loved ones. Many people on this path, they lose their relationships because, and actually this is something in science that happens a lot. Gastric bypass, plastic surgery has a huge divorce rate after one partner gets gastric bypass. The reason for it is because suddenly they are stepping into themselves. They are feeling more confident and they are no longer as codependent on their partner to give them that affirmation, that validation. And very often jealousy and things will come up with the partner that is not used to having someone confident on their arm. And it's hard to deal with when the person you fell in love with is not the person they are today. And you know what? I used to think, well, how hard? They can work through it. And very often they can, therapy and things like that, to learn to love the new person. But guess what? If they're not compatible anymore, and this is probably going to be controversial, it's okay to break up. You know, longevity in a relationship, I was with my ex I was married to him for 25 years. We were no longer compatible for 15 of those years. Why did I sit there? Because I thought I needed to. I was obligated to. And there's another self-love. What is actually best for you? So figure out the reasons we do things. Shadow work is a great way to find a lot of them, but the part I just touched on is the perceived obligations we give ourselves. You know, if staying in a relationship, if staying in a job is not bringing you happiness, if you are in your car on your way to work going, please, I would like to be in a car accident so I don't have to go in, find a new job. But we do this to ourselves all the time. Again, more microaggressions. Because then what do we tell ourselves? I sacrifice everything in my life for this job and they don't appreciate me. Well, then why are you still doing it? And that is self-love, is figuring out why we are not loving ourselves the way we deserve. And so that is the first pillar, which covers multiple things. Shadow work is often how you find them, but again, the other parts of it, there's always three: societal, shadow work, and self-perceived obligations. So then the middle part is the one we actually have pretty good going in our society. Reward yourself. Give yourself atta-girls and atta-boys when you do a good job. Now, I'm not saying everyone's good at it, but what I am saying is the self-love movement that is going on right now, 90% of it focuses solely on this pillar. How do I reward myself when I do something good? How do I make myself feel better? One of mine is I like clothing. I lost over 200 pounds. I want to show myself off. So I reward myself with something I enjoy the way I look in it. Now, another thing I want to touch on, although this is self-love in a more communal and collective sense, even though it's not, doesn't matter, is I am a thrift store person. Has nothing to do with abundance, has nothing to do with finances. It has to do, and I just want to address it, that we are in a quick, easy society of cheap fashion that ends up in landfills. And so I am a firm believer and just want to advocate for when you are finding ways to reward yourself, to pamper yourself, also think about what you care about in the world so that you're not doing things that later you're going to go, yeah, I really probably should not have added to the problem that way. And another huge thing to address is you don't reward yourself with things that hurt you. If you know that you have a weight problem, if you know that sweets and sugars are bad for you, and you're proud that you've lost 10 pounds, you don't reward yourself by going out for a slice of conventional chocolate cake. But we do. I did it tons of times. Yay, I'm feeling healthier, so now let me do exactly the thing that made me unhealthy in the first place. And this is why that pillar, as I said, is my short one, because we're already understanding that in this society with the little reward movement, with the people that are going around and propping each other up, which, yes, needs to be done. We all need to be each other's supporters, each other's cheerleaders, and there are thousands, if not millions, of wonderful people out there running programs to help you feel better about yourself that way. So I don't need to spend a lot of time on it. You can turn on anything and look for women supporting women, empowerment, and there are many resources. The next one is the long, important, and to me, the most vital pillar of all. And honestly, the one that I griped and fought and bitched about the whole time. Discipline. Discipline is self-love in action. I don't eat a lot of things that are in the standard American diet. I eat vegan, and I'm not saying everybody else has to, but I do consider it the highest, and I know it is for me, and so that is what I do. Partially because I don't feel good about it ethically, but honestly, I did it for health initially. And now I would prefer to fast than to eat something that I know does that to my body. And so self-discipline is where you truly love yourself, because you start to go, well, if I do that, it'll feel great for 10 minutes. And then I'll feel bad about it. Well, if you're going to have guilt and shame and feel bad about it, that's not very loving to yourself. If you know it's going to hurt your body, that's not very loving to yourself. And so you will stop doing the things that hurt you. You will stop wearing synthetic fabrics if you know it hurts the environment, because you want an environment that you can breathe the air. We don't want, an ocean full of plastics. I mean, if you do, then your self-love might be keep using single-use plastics for everything. But as we make these changes and we follow into the disciplines, you will learn what is important for you. Now, this is, by the way, I like to say progress, not perfection. I can say these things as if I have always been at the top of this mountain saying, look at me, I'm over 200 pounds lighter. I feel fantastic about my life. I go hiking when I used to have to be in a wheelchair. But you know what? I didn't wake up this way the next morning after I made the decision. I had to work my way into enough love and care about myself, about the collective, which is everybody else, the whole world. I had to care enough about my environment, my children, to wonder what kind of world am I living for, leaving for them, to finally make those changes in a long-term sustainable way. So when you are finding your disciplines, be patient with yourself, be loving with yourself. Because another way that we torpedo our own self-love is we hold ourselves to where we want to be instead of accepting where we are. Now, acceptance does not mean you then go, and I was very guilty of this, oh, everything's great. Acceptance is not a, I'm happy being 340 pounds and in a wheelchair. I wasn't happy. But I told myself, well, what can I do? Had I stayed that way, I would not still be here to be delivering these messages. I would have died already. And I know that for a fact. I was already choking on my own food, which is a sign of the end with multiple sclerosis. So again, patience and love for yourself for where you are. But that doesn't mean you don't do the best you can with where your resources are going forward. An example I'm going to definitely bring up for this is organic food. Organic, yes, it is more expensive. Yes, not everyone has the resources to be able to buy organic currently in their life. However, be honest, rigorous self-honesty with yourself. Can you afford to buy organic if you're not stopping at Starbucks 4 times a week? If the answer is yes, where is your priority? Do you care more about your daily coffee? Which then gets into the reward, by the way. So it is a balance. And your answer might be, you know what? I prefer to put the chemicals and the poisons in my body and still get to have that reward. And maybe that is where you're at. Because again, progress, not perfection. But be honest with yourself about what you're doing. Because once we actually look at ourselves honestly and we see what our choices really are, most of the time we realize, at least I did, the way we live is actually currently insane. I mean, how many times do we go, I just don't have the time to do 10 minutes of yoga or fascial maneuvers or any of, some sort of movement. I don't have 10 minutes to exercise every day. Just a couple stretches. But did you just spend 3 hours staring at your phone and scrolling Facebook? Or, watching TikTok videos? Notice where we are putting our energy is where your true priorities are. And if your priorities are going into things that distract you, video games, TV, and by the way, I use video games because that was my primary distraction for my life, for my health, because I had a fake life that I could log into online. And many of us, we find something to pull us away. Now, there's a few of those that are sneaky. Intellectualism, right? Learning sounds like it is a very high, lofty thing. And yes, it is, unless you are using it to distract you from actually doing the work. Because for many, it's a read another book, but not doing the honest self-reflection in ourselves. Any place we find we are pulling ourselves away from really making the changes to get us where we want to be shows where our priorities are. And those priorities are usually not because you don't want to heal, not because you don't want to get healthy and you don't want a better life. You do. But your fears, those shadows, the reasons you're not loving yourself are stronger right now. They are still telling you, you know what? You can't really do that. So you would prefer to sit there and distract yourself with 3 hours of TV or scrolling on social media than do the things that will make the changes. Again, intellectually, you know you want to make the changes. But the distractions are a sign that you're not ready to make those changes until you address why you're afraid of stepping into your full power. And that is the root behind the majority of why we don't love ourselves. Because if you're in your full power, you have full responsibility. You have responsibility for how good your life goes, but it also means you have to take responsibility for every place where life has screwed you over. We are, and I would like to address, this is not victim blaming, but it does come across that way very often. My dad sexually molested me in 4th grade. You know what? I asked for it. Little 4th grade me did not ask for it. My higher self knew that by having that history, I would be able to heal it and help other people through their journey. So I have forgiven him, myself, for my reactions my whole life. where I let it stop me from becoming my highest self. Because I had been the victim of sexual abuse, I piled on the weight. I used it as a barrier between me and everybody else. If I was, let's be honest, in our society, heavy people are ignored. I could blend into the woodwork. I wasn't noticed. I actually felt safer being unwanted. It was a shadow, and it was why I didn't love myself. But I couldn't have done any different. And the reason it's not victim blaming is because younger me could not have done any differently. It is now my own power to take the responsibility and say, I know that happened in my life so that I could step into becoming a powerful healer, so that I could help other people learn how to reclaim their power. I wouldn't have that strength if I had not endured that. So now, moving forward, I own it. I talk about it, and I have many people who look shocked at me that I say I am grateful for it, because I have seen people change once they have been able to share what they experienced and let that go. And I would not have been able to bring that and help other people. So in my universe, I take responsibility for it. Now, that does not mean that he didn't have his own responsibility. And you're going to find this with people in your lives. That's none of your business. Their responsibility, not my problem. My responsibility is myself and my boundaries with those other people. Were he to have, and this actually did happen, it was one of the few places I did have boundary, blow it off as if nothing ever happened when I became older and wanted to discuss it with him. Because we had a pretty good relationship, actually. Mostly because I didn't know it was wrong until I was much older. He completely didn't take any responsibility, and I cut off communication until he was willing to, and actually he passed before I was able to deal with that. Our avatars were not able to discuss it, but I do feel on a spiritual level that had been resolved. In fact, I even thanked his spirit for it, because I know that at a soul level, he signed up for it to provide me what I needed to, again, step into my own power and be able to be a healer. He would not have... Here we go. What healthy, sane, grown man would do that to their, what's fourth grade, 10-year-old daughter? None. And if he wasn't sane, how could I blame him? It was what his soul did in service to my soul to provide me the strength I needed to be the person I am today. This is the power that comes when you find your own self-love and you heal. You have to, though, take then responsibility for everything good, everything bad in our world comes down to us. And not, you know what, I'm going to share something about a wonderful documentary. It was called I Am. If you have a chance, look it up. It sums up everything that I am saying about this part of your own responsibility. And that is how we prove our self-love through the universe. The war in Ukraine, what's going on in Israel and the Gaza Strip, you know who's responsible? I am. Because in my world, I still believe that those conflicts and atrocities happen. I still need them, obviously, or they wouldn't exist. I need to believe that there are the good guys and the bad guys, and as I heal that in myself, I will have a world where that no longer needs to exist. Which is then when I came to the reason for self-love at the end, and I said, you can change your universe. That's how. I have seen changes in technology where they have said, that's never going to happen in your lifetime. We're never going to have cars that aren't using combustion fuels. We're never going to have farming that doesn't deplete the soil. We're just all going to die. We're going to blow up our planet. Climate change, we're doomed. That was the world I faced 4 years ago. That is not the world I have now. As I change my beliefs, as I love myself, I love every single one of you and every being on this planet. And yes, that includes the politicians that are doing all sorts of the atrocities I talk about, because they're playing their role. My whole world will change. And that is the self-love, is how much do you love yourself to make the changes you need in your life? So to recap, stop accepting less. Start with, don't accept less from yourself, as much as you are capable, and then without beating yourself up for the places you're not ready yet. When I went vegan, and I say this again because I want to I did not start on the top of the mountain. When I went vegan, I was very good for 5 days, and then very bad for 2 days, and then very good for 5 days, and very bad for 2 days. And eventually I went out to, I was very good for 10 days, and then very bad for 2 days. And gradually, as I built up my self-worth, I realized I don't want to do this to myself. And the big giveaway for that one was because I had had the autoimmunes. When I would go off of plan, I would hurt. The inflammation would come back. If you look at yourself, you'll find the places, you know what? When I get up, example, if I get up every morning and I do yoga for a half hour, I have so much more energy that day. Look for the things that are the rewards in those practices, because that's really what helps give you the discipline. We try to discipline ourselves by forcing ourselves through. Sheer grit, willpower, right? What are we taught? If you persevere, you're gonna make it. You know what? If you persevere, you're only gonna make it as far as you are capable before you collapse. What you really need is the carrots, the rewards. Well, I mean carrots because vegan, that's funny, but no, you need the rewards. Because without the rewards, it's not sustainable. How often are we going to crawl across the desert dying of thirst before we say, you know what? Friggin' take me. Go ahead. I'm done. But if we're going across the desert because we know the oasis is right over there, then we have a reward. You know what? When I get there, I'm going to get to go skinny dipping with some of the hottest bodies in the world. Now I'm really crawling through the desert. Give yourself the rewards, the reasons. Follow your bliss and what makes life worth living, or that discipline will not be sustainable. We will not hold it. None of us, animals, people, we don't do things to better ourselves currently. We do things to get out of pain currently in our world. It's also why we settle for far too little, which is, again, it's going to be my catchphrase, don't settle for less, right? Don't accept less. We settle in our society because, oh, thank God, I'm not hurting anymore. That was me, right? I was on so many medications because I was tired of the pain. I placated everybody else around me and did what I thought they wanted rather than being my own true authentic self, because the disharmony was painful. So I would do just enough so everybody seemed happy and okay. But then we never strive to be better. And the world we currently have is the result of none of us striving to make it better. We strive to get out of pain. We strive to, well, maybe if we just do this little bit of not polluting, we'll get 10 more years out of our planet. Instead of saying, why the hell are we not standing up and saying, excuse me, we're killing our friggin' planet? Why? Because we're not looking for utopia. We're not looking to bring back the Garden of Eden. We should be. I am bringing back the Garden of Eden, because that is the new earth we're moving to. I want the world where we're skinny dipping in crystal clear ponds, we're eating delicious food, no one's hungry because you walk down the street and you pick fruit off the tree. We can have that world if we all stop accepting less and stop settling for the, oh, thank God, it doesn't hurt anymore. And I don't blame anybody who does. That was my life for the longest time. What can I do to ease the pain of what this existence seems like? But once you start to love yourself, you realize this existence has so much beauty to offer. And although this is not what I would call technically self-love, it's self-love for the collective. Find the places where you have the little joys and bliss and bring them to other people. Because as you do, your self-love will grow. When someone looks at you and says, oh, I never thought of that, and God, I feel so much better, your self-love will grow, which I'm going to address the difference between validation and affirmation. Validation, we are taught to validation seek. This is a beautiful natural mechanism that in a healthy state exists to help us find our tribe, our people, the ones that are ready to co-create a beautiful world with us. Whether it's co-creation, I should explain that concept, is when you come together with someone else to make something happen. At its largest scale, I want to co-create a new earth where we're having this utopia. But having a business together, writing a book together, bearing children, these are all co-creations. And so when you co-create with somebody else, you together get to form this better world. But if we don't have self-love, your co-creations will never, they'll be twisted, anemic versions of what they can be. Because we are not loving ourselves if we're going, well, this is just what I have to do to survive. This is what I have to do to make it happen. And that is, again, that's settling for less. You don't get to the better, though, without the discipline. You can't have the discipline without reward. And you can't even accept rewards for yourself unless you can go through the shadow work. Get rid of the self-perceived obligations. They are all intertwined because we are all loving beings. And I know there are some people out there that it is hard to believe that they are genuine loving beings. I will not fault anyone who has trouble believing that right now. But from their perception, they're doing the best they can. They think what they're doing is loving. The example I use for this is my youngest child is trans, and there are politicians that are hell-bent and believe actually that my child should be killed or incarcerated because of who they are. How do I believe that's a loving being? They may not be loving to my child, but you know what? From their perception, they think they're actually saving children, saving children's lives because they believe that that is something that is hurting, not them, but the child itself. And I understand that although it is wrong to my perception, and I will fight it, that's the other thing, acceptance. I'll get there in a second. It doesn't mean that it doesn't originate from a place of genuine love in their heart. And then it gets twisted. It gets twisted because we try to control each other instead of just focusing on ourselves. And you can only ever focus and change yourself. And I just realized at this perfect moment that I love the entire world because we are all doing the absolute best we can with the wounds, the traumas, the programming, the fact that we've given ourselves a world that is, well, currently falling apart and full of poisons. But you know what? We change all that when we first heal ourselves and then reach out to those around us that resonate with us. One of the hardest parts of self-love, and I will circle back to the stuff at the very beginning, is it's gonna piss people off. And I have to emphasize this point because it was my hardest. I am built for peace and harmony. I am a lover who is now forced to be a fighter. And I'm forced to be a fighter because if I'm really going to truly love myself and the world I live in, I gotta fight for it. Because if I don't, do you know what we get? Exactly what we've been seeing for the past decades. Actually, thousands of years. I mean, if we want to be honest, we have not loved ourselves as a society. And I don't mean America, I mean humans. We have not loved ourselves for thousands of years. We have been trying to make everybody else into an us without understanding us, we don't even know who we are. This is another thing that goes with the discipline pillar, which is why the discipline is the biggest part of it for me. Get clarity on what you actually want. Because you also can't create the world you want if you don't know what the hell you want. And I didn't. You know, I can sit there and go, I would like a world where there is no toxins. That's great. And then I go, well, yeah, but medical has to use plastic, right? Do we have where we can do surgery in a safe, sterile environment without plastics yet? Not currently. Do we have, you know, I don't feel like washing out a sandwich bag every time, so single-use plastics. We have all these ways that we aren't sure what we want. Do I want the convenience or do I want that world? And until you know what you actually want for yourself, and by the way, there is no wrong answer. I know it sounds like I'm pushing certain things, but that's because that's my clarity and my highest choice. But there may be somebody whose highest choice is to wear only synthetic fabrics. I can't really see how, but yes, because their highest, if they actually have clarity, will be that. But you won't create the world you want if on one hand you're saying, this is what I want, but then your actions are doing, but this is what I'm doing because this one's too hard. And so you need to get clarity of what is truly important to you, and then progress, not perfection. What steps can you take now to work towards it? And review that often, because I can't tell you the number of goals I set for myself 2 years ago that either I totally don't care about anymore because I realized that's someone else's crusade, or have completely changed because I desperately, only a few weeks ago, the self-love I wanted to teach was give me a bunch of half-naked women hugging each other, singing Kumbaya, painting henna all over each other. It's beautiful. And what a life that would be. But you know what? Because I got clarity, because I realized I needed the self-discipline in order to change, that isn't the life that would give me the self-love I needed. Because my self-love would have stopped there. I'm happy. I'm content. And as much as that sounded like utopia, I would have been settling. Not because my life wouldn't have been fun, but because it wouldn't have helped the world. It wouldn't have helped the collective. Individually, the women that were there with me, we would have had a great time. But you know what? We wouldn't be getting to New Earth, the place where all of us, as I said, I like to say, bring the Garden of Eden back. Give us places where all of us are loving each other, where we don't have to play these villain roles for each other, destroying the earth, hurting each other. And you know what? Not only is it possible, it's achievable when we love ourselves to make the differences to make it happen. And that right there, I would like to know if anybody has any questions. I'm sure something else will come to me too, but there are places where I'm like, you know what? I feel good. So, do you have any questions?
I know you're talking about, I noticed you never mentioned, perhaps it was there, compassion.
Compassion, self-compassion was where I said forgive yourself for the things that you did the best you could at the moment. But I appreciate actually bringing it up because I should use the word compassion more. Compassion for others, although important, has nothing to do with self-love. And I know that may sound counterintuitive, but you have to love yourself, or compassion for others is lip service. It is truly meaningless if you are sacrificing yourself for other people, because everyone is a reflection of you. And if you're giving away yourself to have compassion for them, the only reason they have problems in your life is for you to learn to give yourself compassion. I believe I've seen it in my own life. I would have compassion for everyone else. I would give myself away, but I wouldn't have the self-compassion. And again, I appreciate you using the word, but what I realized is when I started loving myself, other people didn't need my compassion the same way. They weren't coming to me wounded anymore. They were already in a better state because I saw them as me. And so you can have compassion for others, but not until you've given yourself the compassion. And having compassion for others without for yourself only wounds you. Self-compassion, though, I will agree with you, for self-love. Now that you do have to have the understanding of the collective, understanding they all are part of you. However you affect someone else will affect you. If you put anger into your world, you will get anger back. It is, to be scientific, really, energy in, energy out. But the beauty is self-compassion. If you put love into yourself, you're then putting it into the world. And if you're putting it into the world, you get it back from the mirror, everyone around you.
So how do you calm your ego then? Because society
yeah.
put us here,
Right.
and the things you were talking about,
Yeah.
those are the ones makes us really upset,
Mm-hmm.
anger,
Yeah,
and along with hatred
I agree.
and things like that. Well, your ego just grabs on that and seems like have no control over it sometimes.
Understood. What I have done, actually, and this has been my recommendation when it comes to the ego, is I don't see the ego as my enemy anymore. I see it as a wounded child that throws a temper tantrum. And to go into the self-love and discipline with the ego, it is the ego that goes, what do you mean I can't have that piece of chocolate cake, and pouts and gets upset, and is the only reason we wouldn't have the self-discipline to love ourselves. Because the ego, like a child that you say no to, throws a temper tantrum. But when you see it as a child that needs love and needs support rather than your enemy, you're able to have what the one service that we actually met through calls a winged ego, but a healed ego. Your ego then is who you are uniquely, not your enemy, because it is no longer the master and no longer controlling. Now, how you get there is the first pillar, the shadow work. Find out the reasons that your ego freaks out the way it does. 90% of the time, my belief is it's fear-based. There is something about the situation that makes your ego feel it needs to protect you. It needs to get angry. And anger, by the way, is not a bad thing. I used to consider anger to be the most awful thing in the world because I believed in harmony. Harmony was my main goal at that point, not growth, which is, as you heal, you realize you prefer to grow than just keep everybody happy. But anger is one of two things. It is either a place where your boundaries have been trampled or crossed over. Very often the other person doesn't know, because how often do we not even realize where our boundary was until it was crossed? But anger is either a place where you need to establish a boundary, or fear uses anger to protect itself. And in those cases where it's fear, it's usually covering up another emotion, grief, sadness. But fear is the other cause of anger. Once you can find out why the ego is afraid, what is it afraid of happening first? Do you need to establish a boundary? Sometimes it's just as easy as, I'm angry because they shouldn't have done that. Do they know they shouldn't have done that? Have you told them that it upsets you when they do that? If the answer is no, your anger really shouldn't be any, but I was going to say really is more accurate to be self-directed than at the person who broke the boundary that they didn't even know was there. If it is not boundary related, then you go into the shadow work. It's fear related. What is it in my life that is making me feel afraid, that my ego feels it needs to drive everyone away from me to protect itself? And that is how you heal that. Becoming friends with the ego as a child, as your unique self, who you are, comes from the ego. Everything is the illusion of separation, not to get too complicated into it, but the ego is what makes us uniquely us. Because if we were egoless, we would all be exactly the same. And if we were exactly the same, one, the world would be awfully boring. And two, the divine would not grow by having multiple perspectives. It would all be the same perspective, whatever was perfect. And I put perfect in quotes because I don't believe in perfection. And actually, that's another thing I'd like to throw into self-love. There is no such thing as perfection. There is only what you consider to be your highest is perfect. The only thing that is perfect is the system. Energy in, energy out always equals the same. But you can only be the highest you imagine, and that will also always change. So perfection is subjective, and if you hold yourself to that standard, you will never be happy because you can't actually reach it. Here's a self-love piece I'd actually like to give you because I'm getting this. Stop moving the finish line. We move our finish line before we got to the last goal. Say I got down to 160 pounds, had been my goal, right? Well, now I'm down around 140. I had already learned, so I didn't do this to myself, but I did early on. I would get down to 165 and go, you know what? That's not going to be enough. Let me make my goal 150. And I never got to celebrate that I got to 160. We move our own finish line as we see bigger for ourselves, but we don't take a moment to go, look how far I've come. So if you need a moment of supporting yourself, of feeling better, look back to where you were. Really see how far you've come, because we will very often, as a form of self-sabotage, move the goalposts before we actually cross the line. We're about to cross the line and then we move them. And we should move them because we do want more. But wait until you celebrate where you got first. Then decide to set your next goal and go further. Like a beautiful garden that you love, you can change it, add things to it, but enjoy it for what it is in that moment as well. And again, a place where I don't think we self-love anywhere near enough is we go, nope, not good enough, so now I need to go further. Nope, not good enough, now I need to go further. And again, we want to strive for more. It's the carrot so that we grow and have the discipline. But be excited for reaching that line in the first place instead of beating ourselves up that it wasn't enough.
I was going to ask you to go further into the discipline and commitment in the beginning because like you say, the ego is, as you're waiting for that to quiet down and do the shadow work, what did you start with maybe in those disciplines in the beginning? Because I'm sure I obviously seen them grow.
Yes,
to that. So what does that look like on the journey?
In the beginning, it was ugly. I projected, which again, for people who don't know, is where you perceive things the way your mind historically believes they're going to be. The example I love to use for it is if your mother-in-law has always been, in your mind, critical, and she goes, oh, nice dress, you will hear it as, oh, well, that's a nice dress. Or even, oh, you look like shit in that dress, depending on how strong your projection is. And she genuinely might have meant, wow, that's a really nice dress. But we will project the inflection. We will insert words. I can't tell you the number of times after I was awake and aware and able to see this mechanism, sometimes, mind you, that I was in a conversation and there'd be a disagreement, and what I would say back that I swore I heard was not what was said. Because I inserted inflection, body language, the look in the person's eye. Our mind fills those in. And we create our own universe and ourself. And so what did my discipline look like initially? It looked like crap, is what it looked like, because I was a master storyteller. And as I said, I believed my own bullshit. So the projections I had were exactly what I needed to substantiate my current belief of what that person's agenda was. I have no idea what the hell the agenda was. Not really. I couldn't unless I was them. But I thought I did. And my mind would fill in the blanks. And as I said, hear words, sarcasm that were never there. And I've seen it very much in reverse where, the person will say back to me, like, well, you were judge of... Not at all. That's not even remotely what my intention was. That is how projection and perspective work in a very short nutshell, but it makes discipline hard in the beginning. And that is where baby steps come in of, first of all, remembering you can only control you. Oh, that's the biggest part. You can only control you. And then find little ways that you can work towards what you want that don't involve the outside. Because eventually they can. Again, working with other people, huge, because the mirror can help show you. But until you learn to see where you're projecting and you learn to not take in other people's projections, which is, I'll address that actually separately because that's a huge part, then you really are best keeping it in your own inner work, because it muddies the waters trying to understand what's coming in from the outside while you're building your discipline. So as an example, what are you able to do towards the goal you want? Take those little steps. Find the ways to reward yourself and to make it enjoyable the best you can, which early on, the rewards are a much more important part, which is why I said I support the people that are out there teaching self-love, singing Kumbaya around the fire. I would love for that to be mine. It isn't, but it's vital, because in the early stages of the self-love, that is what you need. Because if it's not enjoyable, you're not going to stick through it at all. It's not until you start to see the tangible rewards from your work that becomes the carrot. As the weight started to fall off, as I was able to go hiking, as I walked down the street and made heads turn for the first time in 30 years, right? That kept me going. That provided more fuel for the discipline. But in the beginning, you have to provide those rewards yourself. Those little attagirls and stuff, because you know what? The mirror is not going to give it to you. The mirror being everybody else around you. Some might. You might be lucky enough to have a partner that helps you do that. But most of us don't. And most of us also then have to face where other people get jealous or upset. I had a very good friend who, well into this journey, she was a good friend for a long time. We mostly stayed in touch over the internet. And she didn't reach out to me until I was very far along the journey. And when I finally met up with her, she had told me that the reason she hadn't reached out initially was she was jealous. How can she have this healing and I haven't? Instead of, going, please show me what you're doing so I can also join in that. And you know what? That's no fault of her. It's our society. Because how many times do we think, I'm going to bust my ass and it's not going to work? I can't tell you the number of diets I tried. It's not going to work. And I believed it wasn't going to work. So of course, it didn't work. So in the beginning, lots of little rewards. Again, not ones that sabotage you. Lots of pats on the back and attagirls. And I don't want to say keep it to yourself because that sounds wrong. Share with the people you know it resonates with, of course. Because what you can get affirmation from the outside is incredibly powerful for helping you move forward. The problem is if we're seeking validation from the outside, then we're also accepting their negativity. And so the places they go, oh yeah, I tried that, it didn't work for me. In fact, because I know you're a Reiki practitioner, right? Oh yeah, Reiki, they just wave their hands over you. I tried it 3 times, did absolutely nothing for me. Now, how many people starting their journey might have gone, wow, I felt really good after that Reiki session, and then they talk to their friend who goes, it's just a bunch of hogwash. And they go, yeah, you know what, you're probably right. I bet I just imagined it. And now they have lost a powerful tool that was helping them feel better. And self-love, it's an inside job. That's why it's self-love. We want love from the mirror. It's great if it's affirmational, which means it is validating of your true, authentic self. But I'll be honest, how many of us are authentic? At all. I am doing my best to live as authentically as I can. And I still know there are plenty of places I'm not authentic because I don't want to get into a knockdown, drag out fight with somebody at the supermarket because of what they're saying or doing. I don't want to put the energy into it. I make that choice, but then I'm also choosing to not be my authentic self. And to those of us who are empathic, to those of us who are sensitive to the energies. Inauthenticity hurts because we feel like we're crazy when they're saying one thing and we feel another. But here's the thing, I was inauthentic. Do you know why I was inauthentic? Because I didn't want to hurt the other person. Because I knew what I said was going to upset them. Authenticity, and this brings up something you had said when you came in, guess what? It's going to piss people off. It just is. And so I think that's actually going to be my crowning capital thing on self-love. At the end of the day, once you've done this work, accepting that being your true, authentic self is the most self-loving thing you can do, but it's also going to separate the people in your life that are not your people. And it's hard to let go of them. It causes the upset in the world because suddenly your world goes from one where you could just keep your mouth shut and pay attention to this over here, distract yourself so that they can continue on with their life. But it eats at you. You know, say you have a spouse that drinks, right? To excess and in a way that's hurting them. If you're enabling that by ignoring it, by looking away from it, it is killing you as much as it is them. And do you want the knockdown, drag out fight of facing them and telling them either clean your shit up or get the hell out? No, of course you don't. Nobody wants to fight it. Nobody wants to deal with it. But if you don't, you're not being authentic. And honestly, you're then telling your loved one, I'm okay with you dying. I'm okay with you killing yourself. And these are the kind of things that we do when we're, now again, that's an exaggerated version because the best examples are more exaggerated. Someone who's literally killing themselves with alcohol. But even on a smaller scale, places where you know that someone is hurting themselves, if you're not speaking up, if you're not helping them, you're not showing them love. But you can do so in a gentle way because I have to say, I'm not a fan of the abrasive because very often we clamp down and then don't hear the message. They won't hear the message initially. But if you just tolerate it, then all you're saying is, my peace is worth more than being true to my authentic self and having a better world where this is not happening, where you are not hurting yourself. It's a tough one. It's one I've struggled with immensely because I don't like upsetting the apple cart. I really don't, which is why I'm meant to teach it, you know, so yeah, it's hard ones. Anything else? Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's been great. I see myself now because, like you said, I am. This comes out.
Yeah.
I vomit.
Yeah.
Because I tell people, but it always turns out to be I'm the bad one, though. That's the problem.
But it isn't a problem.
It's not a problem, maybe, but it causes problem because the people around you make it like, oh, you're the bad one because you're always talking.
Right.
Or I've been told nonchalant person or know-it-all because intention is never, they don't know or belittle them, but that's how they see it or...
Yeah. And they do see it that way.
My God. Now I'm looking at it, that's what I've been dealing for years now.
Yeah. And because it's the trigger that's...
But
I get triggered.
Well, you're getting triggered, but then you're
triggering them, but that trigger is what heals them.
Yeah.
Here's your permission slip. If you don't trigger them, they will never see that there is a problem.
I understand that. Enabling is one of my things. We do that as mothers.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
We do that as a sister, brother, whatever, family. I get all that. And it always boils down to deep issues as when you grow up. Your family, and you know how you grew up and where you grew up.
Right.
You know, it can't be America. We have a lot of people from other countries.
Yeah.
And the world you're talking about.
Right.
I accepted that. It would be great if the world be in peace at one point. It's not going to be my time. I just don't see it the way it is.
Right.
But war is always made up with humans, not God's creation.
Right.
People don't get that. And I was just listening about your something today. I don't know why. I was laying and I'm like, how did that come? I don't watch TV.
Right.
And the history of the gay and trans, and I was looking at some, I'm like, whoa, the police acting and killing.
Yeah.
I go, okay, you know what? And I turn it off because that becomes too much.
Yeah.
But yes, I boundaries.
And boundaries, by the way, are not supposed to be an electrified fence that hurts everyone that comes near. Do you know what boundaries, the best thing is? It is a bright light that says, if you enter in here, I will be treated sacredly.
What do you mean by exactly sacred?
If, example, someone is always screaming in my face,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
I can say, and scream right back in their face, which I've been guilty of, you know, is a boundary, you know, no, you're not.
Yeah.
That is the angry electric fence. You know what? I'm not listening to it. Close the door, hang up the phone, whatever. I'm not going to listen to this until you're able to speak to me in a reasonable tone of voice, is the I will be treated sacredly. You calmly explain what you require for interaction to continue, and then you stick with it.
Okay, I understand now.
Yeah.
As I'm talking to you, I get angry.
Right.
I feed myself. How do I stop that?
Working on the healing your ego and finding out why it is feeling it needs to be angry and fearful. Yeah.
Because they're hitting something.
They're hitting something that is making you angry.
I'm being triggered. I realize that.
Which means there's something there that needs to be addressed and healed.
Well,
The answer is always ourself. It's always,
I realize that.
Yeah.
But yes,
there is a
I do vomit.
beautiful picture that, if I can find it, I can send down the line. There's a monkey sitting there like this, and a lion roaring in his face. That really is the discipline.
Oh God, that's
is you learn when the lions roar, that's their problem.
Yeah.
So now, by the way, progress not perfection. You're not going to start there.
There's always room for improvement, and the minute we think we're improved, there's always something else.
Correct.
And we think, especially in the last 4 years, all we're looking and seeing is, oh, we thought this wrong, or we thought this, oh, we thought it was right. And baby boomers, I mean, I'm always there too, and I look at them, they're thinking, and there's really so many gaps now with Gen Zs, Y Zs, etc. I mean, I have a child. I go, and that's where the dilemma is. What is right and what is wrong?
You have your own right, they have their own right.
Absolutely, but that becomes an issue when you talk about your right, they don't seem to understand.
Well, if they don't agree with you, you don't have to interact with them.
You can't really do that if it's family or loved ones.
Sure you can.
I can't.
Yeah, not well, and that's something for you to work. The perceived obligation I was talking about in self-love. Perceived obligation that we have to agree with our family or even interact with them if they're not on the same page as us.
I say what I have to say.
Yeah.
But this gets tangled because all of a sudden you know you want to cut ties, but then again this one is smart enough to go attach to my little one. You know what I mean? Because if they can't get to me, easy way to get to me will be my child.
Right.
Or your husband. And I'm
but then you have to make your boundaries of how much you're going to interact.
You know, but that becomes really disgusting. It's ugly to look at that.
It is.
And you see it, it's just like, huh.
But once, I mean, I get back to what you said earlier, and I loved how you said it about the, how the universe, it changes, your world changes. Yeah. That if you focus your energy instead of those right now, just have boundaries of, I'm not going to talk right now. It's not cutting them off completely, and you just work on you. I could see.
I have an example of how that worked, actually, and he wanted me to tell you this story the other day. My ex-husband. Right after I had the huge shift, the Miracles Awakening is what we call it, I, like most of it, had a lot of mental issues with my ex-husband, who doesn't have issues with her ex, right? So I sat and I went inside and I said to myself, you know what? You're not a victim. I left. I stood up for myself. I don't need you to be my, and this was not to him, by the way, this was all in my head, but as if I was addressing my ex-husband, I went, I don't need you to be my villain anymore. I don't need you to be my bad guy. I learned what I needed to learn. I stood up for myself. I left. I put myself first. I'm good. I don't need you to do it. And in less than, I always say 24 hours, but I actually think it was between 24 and 36 hours, I got an email from him. He had been going to therapy and he wanted to apologize for everything that was his side. I mean, still obviously that I had my own, and he was right, but he sent an email saying he'd been going to therapy and wanted to apologize for his part in the things that he had done, that he was able to see he had done wrong in the relationship. I didn't say anything to him, any of it. It was my own inner work that allowed him to heal and change. And when we heal the part of ourselves that feels in conflict with that person, we got our lesson. And because you create your universe, which was what I addressed in the very beginning, how we create our own universe, once you heal the part you needed and get the lesson, they get theirs. They genuinely will shift and change. And suddenly, that family member that you're whatever, either may completely change and come around, or at least not mention anymore whatever the conflicting thing is. It's one of those, because if you get your lesson, they don't need to play that role for you anymore.
You're right. You're right. I mean, I see that. It's just all of us.
It's harder to do. That it's easy to understand, but hard to do.
Oh,
yes.
I mean, yes, I do throw up.
Yeah.
I'm very good at that. No. I'm serious.
No, I get it.
I may not even know the boundaries. Sometimes it has to come out because my anger just fills, and then it comes out. And when the monkey just sits there looking at me, and I'm the lion, guess what? That even irritates me more. And I'm like, we need to communicate. Communication is also very important with people. I don't think no one communicates. Even self-love should be with communication. You're communicating with yourself.
With yourself. I do it all the time, actually. I communicate to my ego. I have conversations with my child. Also, my inner masculine. Because I've had to address, the different traits and energies and actually have communication with the parts of myself. So I agree with you completely. That communication, though, yes, is important with the outside world, but only if it is important enough to you that you keep the relationship despite whatever the difficulties are that you're seeing. And the perceived obligations cause us to hold on to relationships that we shouldn't be. They are not our people anymore, very often.
Well, I so far what I'm hearing you say is every individual is different. Everyone has their own time.
Yes.
But
Agreed.
like you said, the outer people usually come in with anger.
Yeah.
If the intention is good, I like to think that they care about me.
Right.
If the intention is jealous, which I see that too.
Right.
Oh my God, I hear it's something else. Just do it now. Do it now. Do it now. Because you're angry, you could do it now. I'm like, I don't want to do it with anger. Because anger lingers.
Yes.
Anger doesn't go away. You might get what you want, but anger will not dissolve.
Phenomenal advice that I got that is affirming of exactly what you're saying is never, when you can, because again, progress, not perfection.
Yes, it takes
do
time.
things with any emotion that you consider negative. And the reason is then your actions will be tainted. You cannot manifest, which is make things happen. You cannot manifest good outcomes if your motivation or your energy is powered by a negative emotion. Now, that doesn't mean I'm angry that there is child sex trafficking, right?
Yes,
so do things against it, but you don't do it while you're feeling the surge of, oh my God, that horrible person needs to suffer. Because then you are putting negative energy into it and you are actually powering the thing you are against. Instead, you feel it, calm down and say, what can I do? Do I have the power to break up a child sex trafficking ring? Not currently. But I do have an extra $100 that I don't have earmarked for anything, and I know there's a very good charity that is working towards making that happen. You can calmly put energy towards changing what you want without putting your negative, which would be the anger, sadness, all of these, they're useful because they're what motivate you to take that $100 and do that instead of buying yourself a nice dinner out. But we do it from a place of calm so that what we're doing actually will provide the results you want. If you do it with that negative emotion, you will get negative back. Because what we put into the system, we get back.
I'm working on it. But then again, this is a work in progress, and it'll never
exactly.
end. That I believe that's.
Well, I do believe it ends until you ascend out of incarnation, and there will be a point because I believe all of us do make it, and so I know you're saying you're never going to. I know you will because I know we all will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
You showed up.
At some point, you will get it, everything, and you will drop this incarnation, and you will move on to whatever's next.
I get it. I that's the thing.
Yeah.
You send the universe, but sometimes it's negative. I'm just like, I'm sorry.
That's
just
human.
Do it any. I mean, you know what? We make mistakes, and
yes.
I'm only human, and I'm angry when things don't change
right.
rapidly.
Yeah.
And you go, why the suffering? Why does it have to be so long? And then I name off, okay, maybe I did this, maybe I did that.
That's the self-blame part. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, but that's a human nature. That's what
until you heal it.
As the healing part, I don't know when it comes. I just don't want to feel physical. But I had learned my lesson just about a month ago with my breast. Went through it for a whole month, and I say, God, higher being said, you've been worrying about other people. Let me just give you something to worry about and see how you feel.
Force you to focus on you.
Yeah, guess what? I did, but I'm still not changed. Because I get the negative results and I go, okay, full force, we got to do this. But that's my battle. That's my individual.
Actually, the beauty is that you can recognize that pattern, which also, that's
I
beautiful.
recognize a lot of things. Believe me, I wish there was groups of people we could talk. And
that's
I see my healing. You know, I come from a broken family as well. My dad was a alcoholic and womanizer. But I was the one that stood up in the court and age 13 and told her, you know, that man's got to go.
That's a lot of strength and talent.
And then you find out, you go, okay, well, this is who you are, and that makes you very strong. Right. And then I've been called alpha mother, so go figure. I'm actually proud of that because I can stand by myself.
Good. You should be proud of that because that shows a lot of inner resolution and strength that a lot of
and courage. But now I'm stuck somewhere. Something happened. Year and a half. I cannot unlock it.
But you showed up here, so there's a part of you.
Because I'm going to be cutting off the questions and answers anyway. So
there's a part of you
just hit the red
that is
button.
walking
I know.